Emily Carter had always known that one day she would inherit her grandmother's house. Nestled on the edge of a dense forest in the small town of Blackwood, the house was a relic of a bygone era, a sprawling Victorian mansion with gabled roofs, stained glass windows, and a history that stretched back over a century. Emily had spent her childhood summers there, exploring the woods, reading in the sunlit conservatory, and listening to her grandmother's stories about the house's past. It was a place of magic and mystery, a sanctuary from the chaos of the world. When her grandmother passed away, Emily was devastated. The house was left to her, along with a letter that simply read, "Take care of it, Emily. It's more than just a house." She didn't fully understand what her grandmother meant at the time, but she was determined to honor her wishes. Emily, a successful architect in the city, decided to take a sabbatical and move to Blackwood to restore the house to its former glory. The town of Blackwood was quiet, almost eerily so. The locals were friendly but reserved, and Emily quickly noticed that they avoided talking about her grandmother's house. When she asked about it, they would change the subject or give vague answers. It was as if the house was a taboo topic, something best left undisturbed. Emily didn't let their unease deter her. She threw herself into the restoration project, hiring local contractors and spending long hours working on the house. The more she worked, the more she fell in love with the place. It was as if the house had a soul, a presence that welcomed her and made her feel at home. But not everyone was happy about her presence. A week after moving in, Emily met her neighbor, Thomas Grayson. He lived in a modern house just beyond the edge of the forest, a stark contrast to the Victorian mansion Emily was restoring. Thomas was polite but distant, his cold blue eyes always seeming to be calculating something. He introduced himself with a firm handshake and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I heard you're restoring the old Carter house," he said, his voice smooth, but with an edge that made Emily uneasy. "It's quite a project." "Yes," Emily replied, trying to sound cheerful. "It's been in my family for generations. I want to bring it back to life." Thomas nodded, but his expression was unreadable. "It's a beautiful house," he said, "but it's also complicated. There's a lot of history there." Emily frowned. "What do you mean?" Thomas hesitated, as if choosing his words carefully. "Let's just say that not everyone in Blackwood has fond memories of that house. Some people believe it's cursed." Emily laughed, though it sounded forced. "Cursed? That's ridiculous. It's just an old house." Thomas's smile didn't waver. "Maybe. But be careful, Emily. The past has a way of catching up with us." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Emily standing on her porch, a chill running down her spine despite the warm summer air. The first incident happened a few days later. Emily was in the attic, sorting through old boxes of her grandmother's belongings, when she heard a noise downstairs. It was a soft, almost imperceptible sound, like the creak of a floorboard. She froze, listening intently. The house was old, and it made noises all the time, but this was different. It sounded deliberate, like someone was moving around. She grabbed a flashlight and made her way downstairs, her heart pounding in her chest. The house was dark, the only light coming from the attic window. She checked every room, but there was no one there. Just as she was about to dismiss it as her imagination, she noticed something on the kitchen table. It was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly. Emily picked it up with trembling hands and unfolded it. Written in bold, black letters were the words, "You don't belong here." Emily's breath caught in her throat. She looked around, half expecting someone to jump out at her, but the house was silent. She crumpled the paper in her hand and threw it in the trash, trying to convince herself that it was just a prank. But deep down, she knew it wasn't. Determined to understand what was happening, Emily decided to dig into the history of the house. She spent hours in the local library, poring over old newspapers and town records. What she found was both fascinating and unsettling. The Carter house had been built in the late 1800s by her great-great-grandfather, William Carter, a wealthy industrialist who had made his fortune in timber. The house was a symbol of his success, but it was also the site of a tragedy. In 1902, William's wife, Eleanor, had died under mysterious circumstances. The official cause of death was listed as an accidental fall down the stairs, but rumors of foul play had persisted for years. Emily's grandmother had never spoken about the tragedy, and Emily had always assumed it was just a family legend. But as she read through the old newspapers, she began to wonder if there was more to the story. The articles were vague, but they hinted at a darker truth. Some suggested that Eleanor had been having an affair and that William had killed her in a fit of rage. Others claimed that the house itself was cursed and that Eleanor's death was just the beginning. Emily didn't know what to believe, but one thing was clear. The house had a dark past, and it seemed to be reaching out to her. The incidents escalated over the next few weeks. Emily would find things moved around the house, doors left open that she was sure she had closed, and strange noises in the night. She installed security cameras, but they never caught anything. It was as if whoever, or whatever, was in the house knew how to avoid them. One night, Emily was woken by the sound of footsteps outside her bedroom door. She sat up in bed, her heart racing, and reached for the baseball bat she kept by her side. The footsteps stopped, and for a moment, there was silence. Then, slowly, the doorknob began to turn. Emily's breath caught in her throat as the door creaked open. She gripped the bat tightly, ready to swing, but no one came in. The door simply opened, revealing the dark hallway beyond. She waited, her heart pounding, but nothing happened. Finally, she got up and turned on the light. The hallway was empty, but the door to the attic was open, swinging gently on its hinges. Emily knew she should call the police, but what would she say? That her house was haunted? That someone, or something, was playing mind games with her? They would think she was crazy. Instead, she decided to confront the intruder herself. Emily spent the next few days preparing. She reinforced the locks, installed motion sensors, and even set up a makeshift alarm system. She wasn't going to let whoever was tormenting her get the better of her. One night, as she lay in bed, she heard the familiar sound of footsteps outside her door. This time, she was ready. She grabbed the bat and crept to the door, her heart pounding in her chest. The doorknob turned, and the door began to open. Emily took a deep breath and swung the bat, hitting the door with a loud crack. There was a startled gasp, and then the sound of footsteps running down the hallway. Emily chased after the intruder, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. She caught a glimpse of a figure disappearing into the attic. She followed, her heart racing, and found herself standing in the middle of the attic, surrounded by old boxes and furniture. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice shaking with anger and fear. "What do you want?" There was no answer, but she could feel a presence in the room, watching her. She swung the flashlight around, but there was no one there. Then, she noticed something on the floor. It was a photograph, old and faded, of a woman standing in front of the house. Emily picked it up and felt a chill run down her spine. The woman was her grandmother, but she looked different, younger, happier. And standing next to her was Thomas Grayson. Emily confronted Thomas the next day. She showed him the photograph and demanded to know what was going on. At first, he denied everything, but when she threatened to go to the police, he finally broke down. "Your grandmother and I were in love," he admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "But her family didn't approve. They forced her to marry your grandfather, and she never forgave them for it. When she inherited the house, she promised to leave it to me, but she changed her mind at the last minute. She left it to you instead." Emily stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. "So all of this, the threats, the break-ins, it was you?" Thomas nodded. "I wanted to scare you away, to make you leave the house so I could claim it. But I didn't mean to hurt you, Emily. I wanted what was promised to me." Emily felt a surge of anger. "You think that justifies what you've done? You've been terrorizing me, trying to drive me out of my own home." Thomas looked down, ashamed. "I know it was wrong, but I couldn't let go of the past. I couldn't let go of her." Emily took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. "You need to leave, Thomas. If I ever see you near this house again, I'll call the police." Thomas nodded, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "I'm sorry, Emily. I truly am." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Emily standing on her porch, the weight of the past finally lifting from her shoulders. In the weeks that followed, Emily continued to restore the house, but now it felt different. The shadows that had once seemed menacing now felt like old friends, and the creaks and groans of the house no longer filled her with dread. She had faced the past and come out stronger for it. Thomas left Blackwood, and the house was finally at peace. Emily knew that her grandmother would be proud of her for standing her ground and protecting the family legacy. As she sat on the porch one evening, watching the sun set over the forest, Emily felt a sense of contentment she hadn't felt in years. The house was hers, and she was never letting anyone take it from her again. Years later, Emily would tell the story of the Carter house to her own grandchildren, passing down the legacy that had been entrusted to her. And though the house still held its secrets, it was no longer a place of fear. It was a place of love, of family, and of the strength to face whatever challenges life might bring. The silent intruder was gone, but the house remained, standing tall and proud, a testament to the power of perseverance and the enduring bonds of family. Emily had finally found peace in her grandmother's house. The restoration was complete, and the once dilapidated Victorian mansion now stood as a testament to her hard work and determination. The townsfolk of Blackwood, who had once avoided the house, now admired its beauty. Emily had even opened parts of the house to the public for historical tours, sharing the rich history of the Carter family with the community. But peace, as Emily would soon learn, is a fragile thing. One crisp autumn morning, as Emily was tending to the garden, she noticed a man standing at the edge of the forest. He was tall, with dark hair and a rugged appearance. He didn't approach her, but his presence was unsettling. She tried to shake off the feeling, telling herself that he was just a hiker or a curious tourist. But the man kept appearing, always at a distance, always watching. Emily's unease grew with each passing day. She considered confronting him, but something about his demeanor made her hesitate. Instead, she decided to ask around town if anyone knew who he was. The locals were no help. Most claimed they had never seen him before, while others quickly changed the subject, their eyes darting nervously toward the forest. It was as if the man was a ghost, a figment of her imagination. One evening, as Emily was locking up the house after a tour, she found an envelope slipped under the front door. Her name was written on the front in bold, black letters. She opened it with trembling hands and read the message inside. "You think you've won, but the house has secrets you can't even imagine. Leave while you still can." Emily's heart raced. She had thought the nightmare was over, but it seemed to be starting all over again. She immediately called the police, but they found no evidence of anyone trespassing on her property. The letter, they said, was likely just a prank. But Emily knew better. Determined to uncover the truth, Emily delved deeper into the history of the house. She spent hours in the library, searching for any clues that might explain the stranger's presence or the cryptic message in the letter. Her search led her to an old journal belonging to her great-great-grandfather, William Carter. The journal was filled with entries about the construction of the house, but one entry in particular caught her attention. "The forest holds a secret, one that must never be revealed. I have built this house to protect it, to keep it hidden from the world. But I fear that one day, the truth will come to light, and the consequences will be dire." Emily's mind raced. What secret was her ancestor hiding? And how was it connected to the stranger in the forest? Emily decided to explore the forest, hoping to find some clue that would shed light on the mystery. She packed a bag with supplies and set out early one morning, the crisp autumn air biting at her cheeks. As she ventured deeper into the woods, she noticed strange markings on the trees, symbols carved into the bark that seemed to form a path. She followed the trail, her heart pounding with each step. The path led her to a clearing, where she found an old, crumbling stone structure. It looked like a chapel, long abandoned and overgrown with vines. Emily stepped inside, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. The walls were covered in more symbols, similar to the ones on the trees. In the center of the chapel was a stone altar, and on it lay a small, intricately carved box. Emily approached the altar cautiously, her hands trembling as she reached for the box. She opened it and found a collection of old documents and photographs. As she sifted through them, she realized that they were records of a secret society that had once operated in Blackwood. The society, known as the Guardians of the Forest, had been dedicated to protecting a powerful artifact hidden deep within the woods. According to the documents, the artifact was said to hold immense power, but it was also incredibly dangerous. The society had disbanded decades ago, but the artifact was never found. Emily's mind raced. Was this the secret her ancestor had been hiding? And was the stranger in the forest connected to the guardians? Emily returned to the house, her mind buzzing with questions. She knew she had to confront the stranger, to find out what he wanted and how he was connected to the guardians of the forest. That evening, as she sat on the porch, she saw him again, standing at the edge of the forest. This time, she didn't hesitate. She grabbed a flashlight and marched toward him, her heart pounding in her chest. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. The man turned to face her, his eyes cold and calculating. "I'm someone who knows the truth about this house," he said, his voice low and menacing. "And I'm here to make sure it stays hidden." Emily's breath caught in her throat. "What do you want?" The man stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "I want you to leave. This house, this land, it's not yours to claim. There are forces at work here that you can't possibly understand." Emily stood her ground, refusing to back down. "This is my home," she said firmly, "and I'm not going anywhere." The man's lips curled into a sinister smile. "We'll see about that." With that, he turned and disappeared into the forest, leaving Emily standing alone in the darkness. Over the next few weeks, the stranger's presence became more aggressive. Emily's security cameras caught him lurking around the house at night, and she found more threatening letters slipped under her door. The police were no help, dismissing her concerns as paranoia. But Emily knew better. She knew that the stranger was after something, and she was determined to find out what it was. She decided to take matters into her own hands. She set traps around the property, hoping to catch the intruder in the act. She also reached out to a local historian, hoping to learn more about the guardians of the forest and the artifact they had been protecting. The historian, an elderly man named Mr. Thompson, was hesitant to talk at first. But when Emily showed him the documents she had found in the chapel, his demeanor changed. "The Guardians were a dangerous group," he said, his voice trembling. "They believed that the artifact could grant them unimaginable power, but it came at a cost. Many of them went mad, and the society eventually fell apart. But there are still those who believe in the artifact's power, and they will stop at nothing to find it." Emily's heart sank. She realized that the stranger was one of those believers, and that he saw her as a threat to his mission. One stormy night, as the wind howled through the trees, Emily heard a loud crash from the basement. She grabbed her flashlight and a baseball bat and cautiously made her way downstairs. The basement was dark and damp, the air thick with the scent of mildew. Emily's flashlight flickered as she scanned the room, her heart pounding in her chest. Suddenly, she heard a noise behind her. She spun around, her flashlight illuminating the stranger's face. He was standing just a few feet away, a sinister grin on his face. "You should have listened to me," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "Now it's too late." Emily tightened her grip on the bat, her mind racing. She knew she had to act fast. With a surge of adrenaline, she swung the bat at the stranger, catching him off guard. He stumbled back, but quickly recovered, lunging at her with a knife. The two of them struggled, the sound of their grunts and the clatter of the knife echoing through the basement. Emily fought with everything she had, determined to protect her home and the secrets it held. Finally, with a well-aimed swing, she knocked the knife out of the stranger's hand and sent him crashing to the ground. She stood over him, breathing heavily, the bat raised and ready to strike. "Get out," she said, her voice trembling with anger and fear. "And don't ever come back." The stranger glared at her, but he knew he was defeated. He slowly got to his feet and stumbled toward the door, disappearing into the stormy night. The next morning, Emily called the police and reported the break-in. They found no trace of the stranger, but they promised to increase patrols around her property. Emily knew that the battle was far from over. The stranger was still out there, and there were others like him who would stop at nothing to find the artifact. But she also knew that she couldn't let fear control her. She had faced the darkness and come out stronger for it. The house was her home, and she would protect it at all costs. As the years passed, Emily continued to live in the house, sharing its history with the community and preserving its legacy. She never forgot the stranger or the secrets of the forest, but she refused to let them define her. The house became a symbol of resilience, a testament to the strength of the human spirit. And though the shadows of the past still lingered, Emily knew that she had the power to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The silent intruder was gone, but the house remained, standing tall and proud, a beacon of hope in the quiet town of Blackwood. Years later, as Emily sat on the porch watching the sun set over the forest, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. The house was hers, and she had fought hard to protect it. But as the shadows lengthened and the wind whispered through the trees, she couldn't shake the feeling that the forest still held secrets, waiting to be uncovered. And though she knew that the battle was far from over, she also knew that she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The house was her home, and she would never let anyone take it from her again. Emily had finally found a semblance of peace after her confrontation with the stranger. The house was secure, the town of Blackwood had returned to its quiet rhythm, and the forest seemed to have settled into an uneasy silence. But Emily knew better than to let her guard down. The stranger had vanished, but the secrets of the forest and the artifact still loomed over her like a shadow. She spent her days tending to the house and the garden, occasionally hosting tours for curious visitors who wanted to learn about the Carter family history. But every night, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the forest grew dark, Emily felt a lingering unease. She would double-check the locks, arm the security system, and keep a flashlight and a baseball bat by her bedside, just in case. The stranger's words echoed in her mind. There are forces at work here that you can't possibly understand. Emily knew he wasn't just trying to scare her. There was something in the forest, something ancient and powerful, and it wasn't done with her yet. One evening, as Emily was preparing dinner, she heard a knock at the door. Her heart skipped a beat. She wasn't expecting anyone, and the townsfolk rarely visited after dark. She grabbed the baseball bat and cautiously approached the door, peering through the peephole. Standing on the porch was a woman, her face partially hidden by the hood of a dark cloak. Emily hesitated, then opened the door just a crack. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice steady but wary. The woman looked up, her piercing green eyes locking onto Emily's. "You're in danger," she said, her voice low and urgent. "You need to leave this place. Now." Emily's grip tightened on the bat. "Who are you?" The woman stepped closer, her expression grave. "My name is Clara. I was a member of the Guardians of the Forest. And if you don't listen to me, you'll suffer the same fate as the others." Emily's mind raced. The Guardians? She thought they had disbanded decades ago. What do you mean? What fate? Clara glanced over her shoulder, as if checking for something, or someone, in the shadows. "The artifact," she said. "It's not just a legend. It's real, and it's cursed. Everyone who has tried to find it has either gone mad or disappeared. You need to leave before it's too late." Emily shook her head. "This is my home. I'm not leaving." Clara's eyes softened, but her tone remained firm. "Then you'll need my help. Because the stranger who's been watching you, he's not working alone. There are others, and they're coming for the artifact. If they find it, it won't just be your life at risk, it will be the entire town." Emily reluctantly let Clara into the house, her instincts telling her to trust the woman despite her ominous warnings. Over cups of tea, Clara explained everything she knew about the Guardians and the artifact. "The artifact is called the Heart of the Forest," Clara said. "It's said to be a source of immense power, but it's also incredibly dangerous. The Guardians were formed to protect it, to keep it hidden from those who would misuse it. But over time, the society became corrupted. Some members became obsessed with the artifact's power, and they turned on each other. The society fell apart, but the artifact was never found." Emily frowned. "And you think it's still out there? In the forest?" Clara nodded. "I know it is. And so do the others. They've been searching for it for years. The stranger who's been watching you? He's one of them. And he's not alone." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. "What do they want with me?" Clara leaned forward, her gaze intense. "They think you know where it is. Your family has always been connected to the forest. They believe your grandmother knew the location of the artifact and that she passed that knowledge down to you." Emily shook her head. "My grandmother never mentioned anything about an artifact. She only told me to take care of the house." Clara sighed. "Then we need to find it before they do. If they get their hands on the heart of the forest, it will unleash chaos. We can't let that happen." Emily and Clara spent the next few days poring over old documents and maps, searching for any clues that might lead them to the artifact. They revisited the crumbling chapel in the forest, examining the symbols on the walls and the altar. Clara explained that the symbols were part of an ancient language used by the Guardians, a code that could reveal the location of the heart of the forest. As they worked, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. She would often glance over her shoulder, half expecting to see the stranger or one of his allies lurking in the shadows. But the forest remained eerily quiet, as if holding its breath. One evening, as they were deciphering a particularly complex set of symbols, Clara suddenly froze. "I think I've found it," she whispered, her voice trembling with excitement. The final clue. The artifact is hidden in the heart of the forest, beneath the oldest tree. Emily's heart raced. "Do you know where that is?" Clara nodded. "There's a grove deep in the forest, a place the Guardians called the Circle of Elders. The oldest tree is there, but we need to be careful. The forest doesn't give up its secrets easily." The next morning, Emily and Clara set out for the Circle of Elders. The forest was dense and dark, the trees towering overhead like ancient sentinels. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, and the only sound was the crunch of leaves beneath their feet. As they ventured deeper into the forest, Emily felt a strange energy in the air, a hum that seemed to resonate in her bones. The forest felt alive, as if it was aware of their presence and watching their every move. Finally, they reached the Circle of Elders. It was a small clearing surrounded by towering trees, their gnarled roots twisting into the earth like the fingers of giants. In the center of the clearing stood the oldest tree, its trunk wide and ancient, its branches reaching toward the sky like a cathedral. "This is it," Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The heart of the forest is here." Emily approached the tree, her heart pounding. She knelt at its base, her hands brushing against the rough bark. "How do we find it?" Clara joined her, pulling out a small, intricately carved dagger. "The artifact is buried beneath the tree, but we need to be careful. The forest will protect it." As Clara began to dig at the base of the tree, Emily felt a sudden shift in the air. The hum grew louder, more intense, and the trees seemed to close in around them. She glanced over her shoulder, her breath catching in her throat. The stranger was there, standing at the edge of the clearing, his cold eyes fixed on them. And he wasn't alone. Behind him stood a group of shadowy figures, their faces hidden in the gloom. Emily and Clara stood, their backs to the ancient tree, as the stranger and his allies approached. The air was thick with tension, the forest itself seeming to hold its breath. "You shouldn't have come here," the stranger said, his voice low and menacing. "The artifact belongs to us." Clara stepped forward, her dagger glinting in the dim light. "It belongs to no one. It's a curse, and you know it. If you take it, you'll unleash something you can't control." The stranger smirked. "We'll take our chances." With a wave of his hand, the shadowy figures surged forward, their movements swift and predatory. Emily and Clara fought back, their weapons flashing in the dim light. The forest seemed to come alive around them, the trees creaking and groaning as if in protest. Emily swung the baseball bat with all her strength, knocking one of the attackers to the ground. Clara moved like a shadow, her dagger slicing through the air with deadly precision. But they were outnumbered, and the strangers were relentless. As the battle raged, Emily felt a sudden surge of energy, a pulse that seemed to emanate from the ancient tree. The ground beneath her feet began to tremble, and the air grew thick with power. The heart of the forest was awakening. The ground split open at the base of the ancient tree, revealing a glowing, pulsating light. The heart of the forest emerged, a crystalline object radiating with an otherworldly energy. The strangers froze, their eyes wide with awe and greed. Clara grabbed Emily's arm, her voice urgent. "We have to destroy it. If they take it, it will be the end of everything." Emily nodded, her heart pounding. "How?" Clara handed her the dagger. "The artifact can only be destroyed by someone with a pure heart. You have to do it." Emily hesitated, then stepped forward, the dagger in her hand. The strangers lunged at her, but the forest itself seemed to rise up in her defense. The trees swayed and creaked, their branches lashing out like whips, driving the attackers back. Emily reached the heart of the forest, her hands trembling as she raised the dagger. The artifact pulsed with a blinding light, and she felt a surge of energy course through her body. With a cry, she plunged the dagger into the crystal. There was a deafening crack, and the light exploded outward, engulfing the clearing in a blinding flash. Emily was thrown backward, the force of the explosion knocking the breath from her lungs. When the light faded, the heart of the forest was gone, reduced to a pile of shimmering dust. The strangers were gone too, vanished into the shadows. The forest was silent once more, the ancient tree standing tall and unbroken. Emily and Clara sat in the clearing, their bodies bruised and battered but alive. The forest was calm, the hum of energy gone. The heart of the forest had been destroyed, and with it, the curse that had plagued the land for generations. Clara looked at Emily, her expression a mix of relief and sadness. "You did it," she said. "You saved us all." Emily shook her head. "We did it. Together." Clara smiled, but there was a hint of sorrow in her eyes. "The Guardians are gone now. Their purpose has been fulfilled. It's time for me to move on." Emily frowned. "What do you mean?" Clara stood, her cloak billowing in the breeze. "I've been tied to this forest for too long. It's time for me to find my own path. But you have a home here, a legacy to protect." Emily watched as Clara walked away, disappearing into the trees. She felt a pang of loss, but also a sense of peace. The forest was safe, and so was her home. Years passed, and Emily continued to live in the house, sharing its history with the community and preserving its legacy. The forest remained a place of mystery, but the darkness that had once haunted it was gone. Emily often thought about Clara and the heart of the forest, about the battle they had fought and the sacrifices they had made. She knew that the forest still held secrets, but she also knew that she had the strength to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The house was her home, and she would never let anyone, or anything, take it from her again. One evening, as Emily sat on the porch watching the sun set over the forest, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. The house was hers, and she had fought hard to protect it. But as the shadows lengthened and the wind whispered through the trees, she couldn't shake the feeling that the forest still held secrets, waiting to be uncovered. And though she knew that the battle was far from over, she also knew that she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The house was her home, and she would never let anyone take it from her again. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story on Store of Good Stories. If this story touched your heart or made you think, don't forget to hit like and share the video to spread this positive message to more people. And if this is your first time here, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of the meaningful stories we share every week. Your support is the biggest motivation for Store of Good Stories to keep bringing heartfelt and valuable stories to you. See you in the next video.